Part 2 of this little conference on jurisdiction. Let us look at the 3 types of supplied jurisdiction foreseen in canon law. We have common error, we have probable and positive doubt, and danger of death. So, in these situations, the church who wants its children to find grace in order to get to heaven, even if the priest does not have ordinary jurisdiction, the church will supply, will provide, will grant the authority to perform the sacraments validly and licitly. So first of all, supplied jurisdiction in the case of common error. This is what the old Code of Canon Law, Canon 1917, says in Canon 209. Quote, in common error or in positive probable doubt, whether of fact or law, the Church supplies jurisdiction both for the external and the internal forum. And the new Code of Canon Law has taken that practically literally. Canon 144, paragraph 1, quote, in common error about fact or about law, and also in positive and probable doubt about law or about fact, the Church supplies executive power of governance, both for the external and for the internal forum. In paragraph 2, the same norm applies to the faculties mentioned in Canon 883, 966, and 1111.1. It's very technical, as you can see, but it is important because if somebody throws at us, oh, you don't have jurisdiction, we say, wait, one second. Jurisdiction is something very technical, and therefore we have to answer with a technical answer. So, I'm following Father Angles's article, we're at section 2.3, where he will explain the notion of common error. Again, I will not read everything because you can read for yourself. I just want to give the basic idea. We say common error, so it is an error of the community, error of many people. It's on the part of the community whose members, or a number of them, that's why it's called common error, actually believe that the priest has jurisdiction, even though in fact he does not have it. So, and then we divide in error of fact, error of law. It's also called virtual error. Or you can read the text. It's technical, but the important thing is to understand this. Common error means an error by a group of people on a jurisdiction that a priest has. What does it mean in practice, for example? If a priest without jurisdiction to hear confessions sits in a confessional or puts on a purple stole, indicating that he's ready to hear confessions, the Church will supply his lack of jurisdiction for every absolution he gives. As we have said in part 1, it's case by case. Surprisingly as it may appear, says Father Angles, this is really sound Catholic doctrine. So, imagine we are in Lourdes and there's many confessionals in the Basilica of Lourdes, and the priest is praying, and he puts on a stole, he goes and sits in a confessional. Well, people who saw him start going to confession to him. They think, well, he's a priest, he's hearing a dressed like a priest, acting like a priest. He's in a confessional. I will go, even if they don't know that this priest maybe comes from another country or from a whatever. Even if he does not have, in reality, the authority to hear confessions, nevertheless, by the fact that he's sitting in a confessional and hearing confession, the church will supply jurisdiction. That is what we call common error. Father Anglès gives a whole page of canonists, classical canonists over the 20th century, backing this up. That is the teaching of the church. That is the teaching of the church. This question of common error. But I want you to know that, that is in canon law. People make a mistake. Well, the confession is valid. It's valid. Of course, applied to us. Now this does not apply anymore because we have ordinary delegated jurisdiction straight from the Pope. But for the last 40 years, we have claimed this. For confession, and section 2.4 in Father Anglès' article, this is also applicable to marriage. In a society chapel, priest regularly blesses marriage, hear the consent of spouses, and that is repeatedly taking place. So the faithful believe that the priest has the faculties to assist at marriage. Even if they know that he has no faculties, there's an error of law, and because there's an error of law, the church supplies. 2.5, is it permitted to exercise jurisdiction supplied by common error? The question here is, we want to know if it is illicit. Can we do it voluntarily? Can we provoke common error, whether in confession or marriages? As the church says, there's a very solemn interdiction for a priest to hear confessions without the required faculty. We're not allowed to hear confessions if we're not authorized. But all the authors teach that a grave reason justifies and legitimates, so makes it licit, the use of such supplied jurisdiction. For example, a very authoritative book of canon law is by Father Naz, N-A-Z, Dictionary of Canon Law, it's in French. On the article on the common error, he says this: a priest deprived of the power to confess would be guilty if, under the pretext of common error, he would confess a few faithful who could easily go to confession to someone else. So there could be a culpability on the part of the priest if the faithful can't go to one who has ordinary jurisdiction, if the first priest does not have authority. However, if the same priest would go to a confessional in a church where everybody is there, say the eve of a great feast, Christmas Eve, or in a pilgrimage or whatever. So the priest would be licitly in the confessional when, without his presence, without him hearing confession, many faithful will be deprived of the sacraments. So it's for the good of the faithful. And so common error, people do not know all the technicality of jurisdiction. They see a priest hearing confession. They go to confession to him. In reality, he does not have the right to hear confession, but people go to confession and the church will supply jurisdiction. Father Angles continues, it is therefore licit for a priest without faculties to create a situation of common error in order to provide the faithful with the sacraments that they may not receive otherwise. Once again, the first law must be the salvation of souls. And we see this today, and we've seen this over the last 45 years. I've had it, people coming to me, Father, can you hear my confession? I went to the local priest and he did not have time. He says, come some other time. Or he was busy and he refused to hear confession. And the person wanted to go to confession. Maybe they had committed some sins, whatever. Obviously, they had committed some sins. And so in a case like this, it's perfectly licit. Okay? How many times in the local parishes, if you look at the weekly bulletin, how little time for confession there is. In so many parishes, sometimes there's almost no time for confession. They give you half an hour for a whole parish, and they cannot find a priest. And so many priests in the local churches make it hard to go to confession. It's embarrassing to go knock at the door, make a phone call, Father, can I go to confession? And rather than just, having a priest in confession, hearing confession. Do you understand? So, and the church wants people to be in a state of grace. So if priests are, I would say, abusing, in other words, or misusing the sacrament of penance by making it difficult for the people to go to confession, then of course they can go to another priest. I give you an example. It ties in with confession. Confession is part of it. It was in Phoenix, Arizona, about 10, 15 years ago. One of our priests received, over a couple of days, receive, I don't know, half a dozen phone calls, if not more, of people who were in hospital. I said, Father, can you please come and visit me in hospital? Or my father's in hospital. Or he was called to go and visit some people in hospital. The priest went a few times, but after a while he realized that all these phone calls had something in common. They all came from people going to the same parish, Novus Ordo parish. Because they were not our faithful. So why do you call me? So we call our priest and he doesn't want to come. So we call you because we want to go to confession and receive extreme unction and communion, whatever. And so our priest picked up the phone and called the parish priest. He says, Father, I'm the priest of the Society of St. Pius X here in this parish, and this priory, and some of your people are asking us to go to the hospital to bring them the sacraments. It's really your duty. They're your faithful. Answer of the priest, we do not make sick calls here. We don't visit people in a hospital. Thank you very much. God bless. Bang. So if priests refuse to hear confession, people have the right by law, by the very nature of the sacrament, to ask for another priest. And there's common error there. That's what the church says. So in regarding the confession, we have said until 2016, we applied these principles, but don't forget this is only the first one of 3 extraordinary cases. So we can apply all 3. We'll explain the others as we go along. But from 2016, we have ordinary jurisdiction delegated straight directly from Pope Francis. Now, what about marriages? Marriages is the same thing as we have explained it. In our chapels where the sacraments are habitually received, not just Mass and confession, but we also bless marriages, there is an undeniable situation of common error, at least de jure, by law. Our priests act as putative pastors, and the faithful go to them in order to ask their assistance in marriages. So the church supplies the jurisdiction in every case because there are many external and public facts Our chapels are considered quasi-parishes. Okay, we have weddings and regularly and so on. And also because there is a common interest to serve and a common danger to prevent. The common danger is to, if there's no jurisdiction, of course, the moment there's a crisis in the marriage will break up. So you've been married by SSPX priest, you're not validly married, therefore you can remarry if you want. Well, the answer is no, this is not right, because the church supplies jurisdiction according to canon law. So our priests act therefore validly when they bless the marriage of traditional Catholic faithful on the grounds of common error, in which the church supplies the required jurisdiction. They also act licitly, so it's not only it's valid, but there's no sin. Because of the same reason indicated above, there's a grave cause motivated by the present crisis of faith. So 2.63 says Father Angles. I forgot to mention some of the other numbers, but we're up to 2.6.3. Perhaps these arguments do not fully convince our adversaries. Nevertheless, Canon 209 in the Old Code, 144 in the New Code, the Church is a mother and has given the answer. There's a supplied jurisdiction. And even if there was a doubt that our reasoning was correct, we go to the second category of supplied jurisdiction. When there's a doubt, positive and probable doubt, then the church supplies again. And that's the second type of supplied jurisdiction. Section 3 in the article by Father Angles, supplied jurisdiction in case of positive and probable doubt. This is mentioned in the canons we have referred to earlier, Canon 209 in the Old Code, Canon 144 in the New Code, where they both use the expression, Canon 209, in common error or in positive probable doubt, whether of fact or law, the church supplies jurisdiction both for the external and the internal forum. So there's two categories here, two circumstances. Common error is one, and doubt is another one. It's two different things. Every word in canon law is important. And the New Code says the same thing, in common error about fact or about law, and also in positive and probable doubt about law or about fact, the church supplies executive power of governance, both for the external and for the internal forum. 3.2, the notions. Let's explain that a little bit. Well, Father says, who is exempt from doubts? Sometimes we have doubts about the validity of something, especially in the certain laws. For example, are we still bound to abstain from meat on Friday? Okay. There's such a confusion today about this because the bishops have said, well, you can replace abstinence of meat by something else. Give up a cigarette or don't watch TV or whatever. Some other type of sacrifice. And many people are confused. Is that still a law? So there's doubts as Father says here, when navigating in the not always clear waters of canon law, some anxiety or scruple may appear. The very question of supplied jurisdiction. Do they have supplied jurisdiction or not? There's a doubt. If there's a doubt whether the law of suppliance applies or not, well, the answer is, if there's a doubt, the church supplies. As long as the doubt is positive and probable, I will explain that in a moment, the ecclesia supplet. And the minister then has jurisdiction. So doubt, what is a doubt? A doubt is a state of mind in which the intellect suspends judgment between two or more opposed propositions. I don't know which one is right. If the mind assents to one of these propositions with prudent fear that the contrary might be true, such a state is called an opinion or a doubt. So a doubt is when I'm at a crossroad, I don't know, should I go right or left? I'm doubting. A doubt is positive when there are serious motives towards it, of an objective foundation. If it's negative if there's no reasons. The absence of motives capable of provoking prudent assent. Positive doubt is always probable doubt, since the motives on either side are serious ones. So positive and negative. Positive, you must have some arguments. Negative, there's no arguments. And positive is, we always add probable. I mean, there's some arguments in favor of it. And as we saw for common error, there's doubt here of law, whether the law applies or not, and doubt of fact, whether here and now it applies, or there's a particular fact or circumstances is verified. 3.3, what is required to use supplied jurisdiction in case of doubt? So what kind of argument, what kind of reasons to make it, that makes it licit? The authors are very clear, even the strictest authors. No reason or a very light one is required to use supplied jurisdiction on the grounds of Canon 209. And Father will quote Capello, which is a classic author, Capello, Cabreros, Merkelbach, who is also a very classic canonist. Does it apply to marriage? 3.4, yes it does. Okay, and in our cases, 3.5, Father gives certain examples. So the question is, whenever we have a doubt, and sometimes we ourselves, some of our priests, sometimes may have doubts on is there common error, for example. The moment he has a doubt, then he falls into the next category, which is a positive and probable doubt. For example, the priest might doubt, or the faithful might doubt, because the bishop of the diocese has said the absolutions and marriages of SSPX are invalid. So the local authority, the lawful superior, said it's invalid. But the church says, well, in time of necessity, in time of crisis, there's other laws that click in. So do these laws apply, or is the bishop right? So you have a doubt. If you have a doubt, you fall into that Canon 209 of the old code, or 144 in the new code, church supplies. Let me read you the last paragraph of Father Angles of that section. We can and we should have recourse to the suppliants in case of positive and probable error in order to answer those adversaries who oppose our canonical reasoning. So anybody who opposes our canonical reasoning, let us tell them that because our case is supported on solid canonical grounds, both on the old and the new code, on the practice of the church, on the sentence of the Roman jurisprudence, on the doctrine of renowned authors, even on favorable opinions of cardinals, bishops, and diocesan chanceries throughout the world. Many bishops and cardinals have no problem with our sacraments. So, and we have that across the world. We have priests in so many countries. Because of all these reasons, we can definitely affirm that in such doubt, Ecclesia supplet jurisdictionem, the church supplies jurisdiction. And Father gives an interesting proof from the Vatican itself. Remember, in 1987, Cardinal Gagnon came and spent 1 month in a society, churches, seminaries, at the request of Archbishop Lefebvre, to see our work. And from November 87 all the way to May 88, there was a lot of discussions. And in May 88, May 5, 88, there was a famous protocol of May 5, 1988, which Archbishop Lefebvre signed, and the next day he withdrew his signature because of the whole issue of Rome saying, yes, you can have one bishop, but in fact not giving a date, postponing different dates. And so the Archbishop said, well, they say yes in theory, but in practice it's really no. But in that protocol, the Holy See called for what is called a sanatio in radice. It's a technical term which it renders valid previous marriages which were perhaps invalid. It's a technical term. It's like fixing a past problem. That's called sanatio in radice. We heal the roots. But the Holy See was asking for a sanatio in radice ad cautelam. The key word here is just in case. But by saying, and it's the Vatican, by saying, we'll give you this sanatio in radice ad cautelam, just in case, it implies that the marriages celebrated by our priest without ordinary delegation would be valid. There's a chance that it is valid. In other words, there's a doubt on the validity of our marriages. If they had not put these words just to be sure, ad cautelam, if they said, we give you a sanatio in radice simpliciter, that would have implied that we believe that all your marriages are invalid. But here they say, we give you this sanatio in radice ad cautelam, just in case, conditional. So that means there's a possibility, that means there's a doubt, and if there's a doubt, the church supplies. That's the logic. So, we have seen two of the three cases of extraordinary jurisdiction. We have seen the case of common error and the case of positive and probable doubt. We still have to look at the extraordinary jurisdiction in danger of death. We'll see this in the next talk.